Ladies and gentlemen, let's watch a video about most painful punishments. Okay, and they're gonna compare these punishments about like which one was the most and least. Okay, and this is a video from channel called Echoes, and yeah, let's watch it together and let's see which one is the most or which one is the least.
You said something wrong about the church in the Middle Ages, so the Inquisition is after you now. They've used a leather strap to secure a device that looks like a two-way fork.
What the hell?
With two sharp points on your neck.
Uh-huh.
One of its sides is pushing against your sternum, and the other
Oh, it's like this.
against your chin.
So you have to stay like this, straight. If you do this, it's gonna hurt here and here.
At first, you tried to keep your head up to lessen the pain, but you couldn't stay like
But you cannot stay like that all the time, dude.
this for long.
Yeah.
The so-called heretic's fork wasn't deadly,
Why is she doing that?
but made the victim suffer from the
But that thing is too huge, Dad. Bro, she can't even do little bit like this, dude. She's literally like looking up.
tiniest move. However, on the scale of pain based on scientific research, this kind of suffering gets only 27 points out of 140. In
What?
this video, you'll find out about the worst kind of torture in the history of humankind.
Nah, man, don't tell me
viewer
they're gonna
discretion
release
is advised.
animals and stuff.
You have at least a few times in your life been subjected to one of the less obvious kinds of torture. It's just that the executioner wasn't persistent enough in tickling you. In ancient China, this was the primary method of punishing delinquents from noble families, since tickles didn't leave any traces of torture on the body. The victim was able to recover quite fast if the procedure didn't go too far, of course. In European countries, goats were employed as a torture device. The culprit was tied up, and salty water was poured on their feet to make the animal lick them. What's so bad about that, you might ask? It's just that there's an incredible number of nerve endings in the feet, and the goat's rough tongue would irritate them quite a lot.
Yeah, too much.
After a few hours, the tickling starts inducing not just laughter, but also painful muscle contractions.
Yeah.
You lose virtually all control over your body.
Bro, anything too much is bad for you. Just remember, this is like a life thing, you know. Anything, if you do it too much, is bad for you. Anything.
Which causes extreme stress, anxiety, and exhaustion. Moreover, the nerve endings responsible for reacting to tickles also signalize pain.
Of course.
It's just that if we're being tickled for fun, and for a short time,
It's
our reaction
fine.
to stress doesn't go beyond laughter and light sensations in the body. However, if done for hours, this causes the nervous system such overload that the lightest touch causes unbearable physical pain.
Damn.
Now imagine that it's not your feet being tickled, it's your private parts. In India, interrogation of criminals was accompanied by placing a small bug on the culprit's genitals and covering the insect with a walnut shell so
this is called tickle torture, huh?
that it didn't escape. The constant irritation of super-sensitive areas caused by the bug's movements made the torture unbearable very quickly.
Ew.
And the executioners got any confession they wanted. Eventually, tickle torture would result in death by asphyxiation if the victim developed a throat spasm caused by uncontrollable laughter. Other possible outcomes were cardiac arrest or a brain aneurysm provoked by serious stress. Yet on the pain scale, tickle torture got only 32 points since the suffering it brought was mostly psychological. This is very similar to the next kind of torture, the Chinese water torture. At first, the person was immobilized, and then cold water would slowly drip onto their face or head. Gradually, the constant skin irritation caused by the drops and splashes would make the nervous system hypersensitive. The inability to move and the wait for the next drop would literally start driving the person insane.
Crazy, yeah.
Maybe you've even seen this torture in movies. Here's the paradox though. There's no proof that it was ever used in China. This kind of torture was first described by an Italian lawyer on the cusp of the 16th century. In the mid-18th century, German and French doctors attempted to use this method to cure mental disorders. Moreover, the very term Chinese water torture came into active use owing to a trick by the legendary Harry Houdini. So, does the water drop torture actually work? Since it can look harmless at first glance, a few bloggers have dared to try it out themselves. The water drop torture was also tested by the Mythbusters. All participants knew they were actually perfectly safe and could be freed at any moment. Yet everyone went through a hellish experience. At first, the experimenters suffered from cold, thirst, psychological tension, and physical discomfort.
No, man, I know I won't be able to survive this because I already freaking hate rain, okay? And just one drop, just dropping here after every few seconds. Nah, I will get irritated as hell, dude.
Their entire bodies started aching, and breathing problems arose. It all ended in a panic and desperate pleas to be released.
That is the worst.
In addition, after this episode, the Mythbusters received an anonymous letter whose authors reportedly found out that the Chinese water torture may cause mental issues that persist for 20 hours.
Oh.
So on the pain scale, the water drop torture received 40 points, and a huge question as to whether it was actually used in practice. At least because it was replaced by much crueler kinds of water torture.
This one. No.
One of them was the Swedish drink. This name was invented by the Germans. During the 30 Years' War, they became victims of the Swedish army servicemen, mercenaries, or marauders. This method of torture went as follows. Through a funnel, the perpetrators would pour buckets of the most disgusting liquids imaginable into the victim's throat.
Oh man.
They used everything from urine and filth to manure and feces.
Oh
This
my
was the
god.
Swedes' way of torturing the civilians, to force them to give up their money or food.
Ah.
Not only did the victims feel disgust and humiliation from being subjected to the Swedish drink, they also contracted deadly diseases.
Of
Furthermore,
course.
their stomachs stretched, causing horrific pain. The perpetrators would often use wooden planks to put pressure on the victim's bloated belly, or hit it with sticks to deepen the suffering. So, on the pain scale, the Swedish drink got 46 points out of the possible
Damn, that's
140. Very
Wow.
often, one kind of torture ranged from public humiliation, accompanied by intense discomfort, to a death punishment with unbearable suffering. One of such hellish inventions was the cane. It's a large board consisting of two halves with a hole between them, used to keep the device on a person's neck. The cane wasn't secured in any way.
Whoa, look at this one. Damn, this one looks so bad, dude. So he's standing on one leg, and the other, like the foot thing, is on the in here, and one hand is here and other is outside, and his neck is, damn, that looks really uncomfortable.
So
dude.
the culprit had to support the board with their hands and balance it while walking. To intensify the punishment,
Wow.
the person in a cane could also be chained, stopping them from ever sitting down. Moreover, the cane's parameters would change according to the severity of the punishment. It could weigh anywhere from 9 to 15 kilograms and have a square, rectangular, or disproportionate, irregular shape. Sometimes
Like you
they
cannot
would even
sit.
double or triple.
Or double.
Often a cane would be so large that the victim would be unable to touch their face to eat or drink. If they weren't helped by those who cared, the victim would die a slow death of hunger and thirst. Yet the cane was also used as an execution device. The convict was placed inside a tall cage made specifically for this purpose.
Wow.
A cane would be secured above. Then, a prop would be taken from under the victim's feet, and they would
Oh no.
slowly be strangled with the board.
Yeah.
That's how people were executed in China as recently as 1900, suffering excruciating pain. On the pain scale, cane torture sits at 62 points. However, even this horror is far from being the worst thing people ever came up
Just 62?
with. Europeans during the Middle Ages were especially creative in their acts of cruelty. It was then that they invented and actively used a contraption called the Judas cradle. It's a spiky wooden or metal pyramid secured on a support with a special clamp over it. First, the victim's arms and legs were tied, and then their trunk was secured with a metal ring attached to the ceiling or the wall with ropes. After this, the person was slowly seated on the pyramid's sharp point. I won't go into the horrific anatomical details, since it's clear anyway that the process caused unbearable pain. Moreover, such torture could go on for days. If the executioners wanted to receive a confession or other information, but the victim remained silent, they tied weights to their arms and legs, causing the pyramid edges to gnaw at the poor person's body even more.
That is bad.
That wasn't enough. The Judas cradle was never cleaned, so it became the breeding ground for deadly bacteria. So, even if the victims managed to survive, they often died of infections. At any rate, they remained scarred physically and psychologically for the rest of their lives.
That's
crazy. Why the Judas cradle received 79 points on the pain scale, crossing the midpoint. However, the first device to go beyond
what is 140, dude, or close to 140? Like, what are those things here?
100 in our list is the oubliette. It's a horizontal tunnel with the only way out in the form of a grated opening above, used as a dungeon. Often, it was so narrow that the prisoners couldn't even sit down. Moreover, oubliettes were built right there in the castle so that the victims could hear human voices and smell the food, causing them even more psychological suffering. Yet, the real torture was the fact that the prisoners were literally forgotten about in these holes, and they slowly died of thirst, hunger, exhaustion, and infections. Compared to this, a Judas cradle execution was a swift way to relieve one's suffering. The oubliette is a kind of immurement, which has been practiced since ancient times on all continents. In the Roman Empire, the most influential Vestals who had broken their virginity pledge were sentenced to death. It was against the law to shed their blood, though. So they were immured alive, fated for a slow, desperate death.
Damn.
If you think this insane practice remained in days past, you're wrong. In Mongolia, this
Whoa. Damn. That is so bad, dude.
barbaric execution method was still in use until at least 1913. So immurement in its different variations receives 108 points on the pain scale. But what if you're not alone in this closed space? Then it's an entirely different kind of punishment. Rat torture.
Oh man, I hate rats.
As far back
Nah.
as in the 1st century AD, the cruelest emperor in the history of the Roman Empire, Nero, used rats to torture those who fell out of favor. They say he put the victim into a barrel with hungry rats who quickly ate the person alive.
Oh,
in
man.
India, they made criminals wear wide pants, which were first tied around the ankles and then filled with rodents. Any ideas as to which body parts suffered the most and how painful it was? However, medieval torturers took it even further. They tied the victims down to immobilize them, then placed a bottomless cage on their abdomens and filled it with rats. Then they put hot wood coal on the grates, and the rats became unbearably hot. First, they tried gnawing at the cage in desperate attempts to escape. Later, though,
Ooh.
the rats realized they were standing on a soft human body and
They
started
would start eating?
eating their way
Oh.
out through it.
Ooh.
Sometimes the cage was put on the victim's head, near the mouth,
Whoa. Oh.
or other body parts. I'll let your imagination fill in the details. The most
That
horrible
is
thing
insane.
is probably the fact that in South American countries, rat torture was in use until the 1980s. It received 112 points on the
I
pain
feel
scale. It
weird.
would seem that there's nothing worse than this.
I hate
But
cats.
before we
Rats,
get to the
not
most
cats.
horrifying
Cats are
tortures
favorite.
that scored the maximum of 140 points, there are still 2 more devices.
Okay.
The first of which is the rack. This is
Rack.
another deadly invention of the Middle Ages. It looked like a wooden frame with rollers on both ends. The person's limbs were tied to them, and when the torturers would start turning the roll
Don't tell me they're gonna turn and it's gonna go opposite way and it's gonna like stretch their limbs to the opposite sides.
rollers, the victim's arms
Oh, I knew that. I saw that coming. That is insane. That is horrifying, dude.
and legs would stretch in different directions. This caused unbearable pain due to
Of course.
joint displacement, muscle
Oh, that is bad.
and ligament ruptures, and, in the most horrific cases, even bone fractures. The executioners could torture the victim like this for hours or even days to beat the confession or the necessary information out of them. Sometimes, a specifically trained person would supervise the victim's condition to keep them conscious and alive before a specific time.
Okay.
So, it's unsurprising that just threatening someone to send them to the rack would often be enough to obtain the necessary information.
I see.
This horrible type of torture received 116 points on the pain scale.
Damn.
However, citizens of ancient Greece managed to outperform even the cruelty of medieval European torturers, being the creators
No, man, but I feel I don't know.
of one of history's most terrifying torture devices, the brazen bull.
Bull?
According to stories, it was built by an Athenian named Perilos as a commission for a Sicilian tyrant. Followers
They're gonna put person in the bull and put fire under it and he's gonna like a boil or something? Or they're gonna put water in the bull as well and put a person in there as well or something?
in the 16th century BC. It was a hollow copper statue of a bull with a hatch on its side. A person would be pushed inside,
Knew
the
it.
hatch would be shut, and then the torturers would start a fire under the bull's belly. Furthermore, the statue's nostril structure made the victim's scream sound like the bull's bellow.
I saw that coming as well, but that is insane as well, man.
Yet this barbarism was apparently not enough. So after the execution, the victim's bones were used to make jewelry to then be sold on markets.
Oh,
The
wow.
inventor of this hellish machine realized very quickly that doing business with tyrants was a bad idea, since the first person followers tried out the brazen bull on was Perilos himself. First, the man's skin started burning in the places where it touched the metal. Then, the hot air gradually burned his airways and lungs. He went on to slowly cook alive before choking to death or going
That is
unconscious.
crazy, man. That
Before
is
this, though, Perilos went through the
unimaginable.
agony that reached 130 points on the pain scale. Even this horror, though, won't compare to the fate of those sentenced to lynching.
This is the last. Don't tell me this is gonna go all the way to like 139. Lingchi.
It's definitely one of the most barbaric punishments in
Nah, that
humanity's
bull one is
entire
insane.
history. And it hails from Asia. It was used in China, Vietnam, and Korea right until the early 20th century to punish perpetrators of the most heinous crimes like mass murder and high treason.
Why it looks like he's gonna cut his private parts or something like that.
as well as to eradicate the emperor's personal enemies. It comes as no surprise since the
Cut the ears?
victim would be tied to a pole in a crowded space to turn the execution into public humiliation. Then, a few torturers would slowly cut pieces of flesh out of the convict's arms, legs, and chest. We know from historical records that
Wow, look at that,
during
dude.
Ling Chi, the victim would suffer
They are literally taking off his skin.
from 100 to 3,000 wounds. That's why this torture is also dubbed death by 1,000 cuts.
That should be, man, so painful.
Although the experts state that with such wounds, a person would most likely die within 20 minutes. Sometimes the families of the victims would bribe the executioners to inflict a deadly wound right away. This wouldn't remove the victim's physical pain, but it's worth remembering that for the Chinese, Ling Chi was also a spiritual punishment. According to their beliefs, this disfigurement of the body wouldn't allow the victim to be whole and healthy in the afterlife. This horrific execution method officially remained in use in China until 1905. This type of torture received the most points on the pain scale, 140.
That is crazy, man. All of them are crazy, dude. Honestly. But I feel like, yeah, I mean, this one is bad, but damn, this bull one. And bro, if you hate rats as me, oh, I wouldn't survive those rats, dude. And this one, the way they attach the weight to it, and so you can, that's gonna be insane. And this one as well, like you have to keep standing all the time. You cannot sit, and your arms would be like this, or legs would be other direction, you know. That is crazy. And the water, yeah, water one is on a low scale as well, because yeah, of course it's not as painful as the bull or this flesh, you know. And yeah, bro, all these were crazy, dude, crazy. And I really like they showed kind of an animation as well to understand it. Most of these you can see in maybe some museums and stuff like that, or places like that. Yeah, I'm sure about that. But yeah, thankfully nowadays we don't have these kinds of harsh painful punishments, dude. The most we have is death sentence, or you know, something like that, or life sentence, something like that, you know. So like you just sit on a chair and they execute you like that. And thank God we don't have stuff like this these days, thank God. Because I mean, I get it, if someone do bad they should be punished bad as well, but these are just too much, man. These are inhumane, you know. Like when you get these, you don't think that other person is a human being at all, you know. So that's why I think so. Thankfully we don't have these anymore. We have little bit appreciation, or little bit still sympathy about that, oh, he's a human being, you know. So but yeah, it's a really good video though from Echoes. And yeah, that's it for this one, and I will see you guys in the next one.